Tony Blinken goes to China. Finally, after the Chinese refused to meet with him, I want to underscore one point. They're still refusing to let the military leaders speak to each other. So our Secretary of Defense cannot speak to the Minister of Defense of China, and that was after this meeting. But Tony Blinken sits down. He makes this statement. It is very confusing to the American people, and I think rightfully so, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and to make it so bluntly without an explanation. Let's take a listen.
On Taiwan, I reiterated the long-standing U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed. It's guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques, the 6 assurances. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side. We continue to expect the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences. We remain committed to meeting our responsibilities under the Taiwan Relations Act, including making sure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself.
So, I mean, there you go. It's on the one hand, we don't think Taiwan should be independent. On the other hand, we're providing Taiwan with lots of weapons to prevent a Chinese invasion, or try to put off a Chinese invasion. So I want to go to Rick Grenell, because, Rick, so people hear that, and it is confusing, because if we don't believe that Taiwan should be independent, then instead of setting them up to defend themselves from a military invasion, why aren't we just negotiating some kind of deal with China and Taiwan?
Look, first of all, this is a complicated issue, and language is never really going to please both sides. The historical significance is that the United States has always had a one China policy. And when we say one China policy, what we mean is that Taiwan is China's. And so asking someone, is China independent, is really asking someone, are you disagreeing with the idea that we have a one China policy? Whenever you start to get too close to Taiwan, whenever you talk about Taiwanese independence, you really make the Chinese angry. So when you come to negotiations, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to make these pronouncements? Because if you're going to be negotiating, it's going to create a real difficulty. What's better to do is to look at the Chinese privately, look at them in the eye, and say things like, do not move on Taiwan. You want to have a president that's got a credible threat in order to scare back the Chinese. And I would argue that Donald Trump absolutely has a credible threat. When Trump says something to another country, the other side thinks, you know what, he just may do it. We got to be careful. He just may do it. Now with Joe Biden, when he says something, I think the other side usually says, he doesn't mean it. Look at Afghanistan.
Whatever is what they think. Yeah, whatever. But Rick, let me ask you this, because I know people are thinking this at home. So if there's a one China policy the United States have, but we're arming Taiwan, I mean, and then we're saying, so I think it'd be really important for you to explain this to what is going on here, because we're arming Taiwan while we're saying, well, it's part of mainland China. It sounds like, how could it be both?
Look, you just put your finger on the hypocrisy of the foreign policy community in Washington for the last 100 years. They don't think that it is a problem to say one thing and do another. We also walk a very fine line where many people want to arm Taiwan. They want to support Taiwanese independence. The problem is when you get in as the president, you suddenly freeze up and you can't quite say it. And so thank God we had Donald Trump, who was pretty open and honest about supporting Taiwan. But what you're really referring to, Jay, is the Washington hypocrisy. No one should be surprised that we have Washington hypocrisy.
You know, I think to get back to this too, Rick, I want your reaction as well to Hunter Biden here. With people see these investigations go on for 5 years, and it ends up with a slap on the wrist. It's not that surprising that with these charges that were being discussed, that would be the case. I guess the only glimmer here is that this U.S. attorney is not closing the investigation to the Bidens. It is ongoing. They did confirm that. And so maybe the more complicated parts of the investigation, like the Burisma issues and those, are being looked at. But this, again, people see it and they're like, they look at Durham and no one really gets in trouble, and they look at this and it's a slap on the wrist. And it does feel like, but if you're on the other side politically, you end up getting raided. We've had people with IRS agents show up at their house. These are just average American stories that Jim Jordan's uncovering, showing up at your door, charging you with every possible crime on the books, and taking it very seriously. So this two-tiered system of justice, it seems like we're feeling it every single day.
Look, I think the headline here is that Merrick Garland is afraid of Joe Biden. Clearly, Joe Biden controls the Department of Justice. You cannot come up with any other reason why there's a slap on the wrist, why it's a sweetheart deal for Hunter Biden after years and years of investigations and allegations and refusals to actually investigate. I think the mounting evidence, photographic evidence, that Hunter Biden was guilty here really forced the hand of the DOJ. They would not be doing this if we didn't have photographic evidence and the hypocrisy being presented in our face every single day. And they live in a bubble in Washington, D.C., and DOJ somehow thinks that by doing this, it's going to help their case against Donald Trump to pretend like it's not a two-tiered system. But when you look at the charges and you look at the lack of investigation on all the Burisma, Ukraine, China deals that the Biden family has had, and then you just do this gun deal with Hunter Biden, you really see that this is a sweetheart deal, and there is two-tier justice system. It's very sad.
Go back to this China-Taiwan thing. I mean, this is because people are commenting, and I'm reading comments. So we do not support Taiwanese independence, but we're committed to making sure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself. From what? Because we don't support Taiwan's independence. And I'm not taking a side on that. I'm just saying, you say it's Washington doublespeak, but it really sounds absurd.
Yeah, it does sound absurd, and I do think that we have to be open and honest about what the Chinese, communist Chinese have done to the United States through COVID, through spying, and we need to be much more honest about them as a force against us, as somebody who's trying to bring the United States down. We need to be very clear about that. I think the difficulty, Jay, is that Taiwan is very small and China is very big, and it's in their region. And so the stakes are incredibly high when you think about the implications of our words.
Rick, we appreciate it. Senior Advisor, International Affairs and National Security. Rick, thanks as always for being part of the broadcast.